intermittent fasting was like a bit of a godsend for you. It has been highly contested on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
What is, in your opinion, as someone that has spent a lot of time researching, practicing, and coaching intermittent fasting, what is the optimal structure and the most important foundations to understand about intermittent fasting?
The best structure is the structure that works best for you as the individual. It's not the sexiest answer, but it comes with practice, and it comes with determining, am I someone that likes to eat in an 8-hour window? Am I someone that likes to eat in a 4-hour window or a 6-hour window? The best form of intermittent fasting is the one that you don't get addicted to, the one that you can still use as an effective tool without using as a crutch. The best form of intermittent fasting for the individual is going to be the one that you feel the best on, the one that you get the heightened mental alertness, that clarity that you seek out. The moment that you start to do it because of an arbitrary number is the moment that you've already lost the battle. The biggest benefit to me with intermittent fasting is not body composition changes. It's not cognitive awareness. It's not this. It's the element of mastery that comes with it. And that's where people miss the boat, because you cannot contest that. You can sit here and you can fight every single nook and cranny of intermittent fasting based upon where you stand in your views of nutrition, time-restricted feeding. Say, oh, well, caloric restriction is just as good. Well, yeah, intermittent fasting is kind of caloric restriction. You know, this, that, whatever. You cannot argue with me that there is an element of mastery that comes into place with abstaining from something. We talked about this with caffeine. We talked about this with alcohol. Food is a drug that we are constantly exposed to, which means that it's incredibly difficult to abstain from it in a proper way. And we are bombarded with social cues to tell us that it's okay to eat whenever we want. Is that the truth? Like, should we eat whenever we want? Should we eat ad libitum? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly real world because that's the world we live in today, but is it accurate? Is it fair to assume that that's how we should eat? Regardless of your beliefs there, being able to abstain from food and having the control to do so seemingly gives me control in gives me control in a lot of other elements of my life. And maybe that reflects back to my childhood and wanting to have some control. Mm-hmm. But there are a hell of a lot of people that respond in a very similar fashion to I do.
That's very interesting. The fact that it's about the story that you tell yourself to do with the intermittent fast as much as it is to do with some magic that comes along for the ride.
Yeah.
I had Peter Attia on the show yesterday, and he said the exact same thing. Every study that he has found so far hasn't suggested that there is any secret sauce hiding in time-restricted eating beyond caloric restriction. That there is no, it just doesn't seem, it seems to be a very easy to follow route for caloric restriction. Is that your reading of the literature as well?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is a little bit of nuance there. I think that people that are severely metabolically deranged and have severe metabolic disorder probably get slightly different benefit, because there's something that needs to be unraveled there. And I think Peter's actually even talked about that. It's like people that when you're in a severe situation where you are very, very unhealthy, then abstaining from food in particular time fashions could have other advantages.
That autophagy and stuff.
Well,
like
autophagy is one of these things. Like, it's a word that's thrown around, right?
Is it bullshit? Is autophagy bullshit?
It's not bullshit, but it's definitely not this magic. Like, it's happening all the time, right? If I go into a caloric deficit, or if I take some time in between meals, or what the biggest driver of autophagy is exercise, right? Nobody talks about that. That's not sexy. You can't say exercise is going to induce autophagy. It's going to induce it 3 times more than fasting will. Now, there are different types of autophagy. There's macroautophagy, microautophagy. There's lipophagy, which is where you're actually sort of recycling fat cells. All different varying forms that happen at varying levels based upon what someone is doing. Fasting, exercise, general caloric restriction. And autophagy is dictated a lot of times by many things, but at the very simple level, AMPK phosphorylation, which is a dimmer switch, not a light switch. So yes, the more aggressive the caloric restriction, the more aggressive the exercise-induced deficit, the more aggressive the autophagic flux. Now, with that being said, it's like you can turn that to a certain degree, and it's probably going to reach a maximum before you start like degrading tissue and having a negative outcome. So it's not a light switch where it's like as soon as you go into a deficit, you flip a switch and you have maximum autophagy. the argument with that is like, okay, well, intermittent fasting, you're abstaining from food, you're ending up in that caloric restricted phase significantly faster because you're just not eating. So one could argue that you flip that dimmer switch a little bit faster. And if you combine that with exercise, maybe you get more autophagy. That's certainly a valid argument, but it does not warrant us to say that like intermittent fasting is the best way to get autophagy, not by any means.
Okay. What about building muscle while fasting?
So I think it sounds almost insane to say like while you're literally fasting, you're going to build muscle. It's funny enough, I think Peter Attia had actually mentioned some point in the past, like muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis are always a balance of each other. And when you are in a fasted state, you have a high degree of muscle protein breakdown. That does not mean that you're necessarily catabolizing muscle. What it implies is that you could be breaking down tissue from one area of your body. And then after the fast is complete, when muscle protein synthesis increases, you reestablish formation in another area of your body or in that same area, right? So as long as basic protein needs are met within your eating period, you absolutely can build muscle with intermittent fasting. But I think there's a line. I usually kind of draw an arbitrary line at like 24 hours. I feel like if you're doing consistent 24-hour fast, like every other day, perhaps it's harder to build muscle. But if someone's doing like an 18-6, 3 or 4 days per week, of course you can build muscle. I talked about this recently. Look at your calories over the course of a 7-day period, not daily. Like if you want to be in a surplus, be in a slight surplus at the end of the week. If you want to be in a deficit, be in a slight deficit at the end of the week. Maybe Monday you eat 4,000 calories. Maybe Tuesday you eat 1,000. Maybe Wednesday you eat 4,000. Maybe Thursday you eat 1,500. It's like that constant undulation might be good for the human metabolism because it doesn't reset every night at midnight to 0.